What if I told you that the biggest thing destroying your future isn't failure? It's not bad luck. It's not your enemies. It's not your lack of talent. It's not even your fear. It's something much more dangerous. Something so normal, so accepted, so deeply woven into modern life that most people never realize it's controlling them. And the worst part? You probably carry it with you every single day. You wake up with it. You feed it. You protect it. You obey it, without ever questioning whether it's helping you or quietly destroying the person you could become. This addiction doesn't leave marks on your body. It doesn't send you to a hospital. It doesn't announce itself as a problem. Instead, it whispers. It tells you to wait. It tells you to stay comfortable. It tells you to seek approval. It tells you to avoid risk. And before you know it, years have passed. The dreams you once had feel distant. The goals that once excited you now feel impossible. And somewhere deep inside, a question begins to haunt you. What happened to me? Because there was a time when you believed anything was possible. You had ambition, you had energy, you had hope. You imagined a future bigger than your circumstances. But then life happened. Slowly, quietly, one day at a time, and the addiction began to grow. Not because you were weak, not because you were lazy, but because it was easier to follow the crowd, easier to stay where it felt safe, easier to choose temporary comfort over long-term growth. And every time you chose the easier path, the addiction became stronger. There was once a young man named Daniel. When he was 18 years old, he believed he would change the world. He had notebooks filled with ideas. Business plans, goals, dreams. He spent nights imagining the life he wanted. He wasn't rich. He wasn't connected. But he had something powerful. He had belief. The belief that one day, his life would become something extraordinary. Then came his first setback. A project failed. People laughed. Friends told him to be realistic. Family members advised him to stop dreaming so big. And slowly, doubt entered his mind, not all at once. Little by little, like water dripping onto stone, one drop at a time. Soon, Daniel stopped talking about his dreams. Then he stopped working on them. Then he stopped believing in them. Years passed. He got comfortable. He found a routine, a predictable life. Nothing terrible happened, but nothing amazing happened either. And that's what made it dangerous, because comfort rarely feels dangerous in the moment. It feels safe, it feels relaxing, it feels reasonable, but comfort has a hidden cost. Every day you choose comfort over growth, you're making a trade. You trade possibility for certainty, you trade progress for security, you trade potential for convenience. And at first, the price seems small. One missed opportunity, one postponed goal, one delayed decision, but those small choices accumulate. Days become months. Months become years. Years become a life. One evening, Daniel found an old notebook from his teenage years. Inside were goals he had forgotten, dreams he had abandoned, promises he had made to himself. As he turned the pages, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pain, not because he had failed, but because he had stopped trying. The realization hit him like a storm. His greatest regret wasn't the mistakes he made. It was the person he never became. That night he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and thought about all the years that had disappeared, all the opportunities he ignored, all the risks he refused to take, all because he was addicted to comfort. And that's when he finally understood. Most people don't lose their future in a single moment. They lose it slowly, one comfortable decision at a time, one excuse at a time, one distraction at a time. The addiction doesn't demand everything immediately. It only asks for today. Just one more day, one more delay, one more excuse, one more reason to wait. And then it asks again tomorrow, and again the day after that, until eventually, waiting becomes your identity. Many people think they're waiting for the perfect opportunity, but often they're waiting for permission to start, permission to fail, permission to succeed, permission to become who they already know they should be. But nobody is coming to give that permission. Nobody is coming to rescue your future. Nobody is coming to build your dream. Nobody is coming to create your life for you. And that's a difficult truth, but it's also a powerful one, because the moment you accept responsibility for your future, you take back control. For years, Daniel believed circumstances were holding him back, but circumstances weren't the real problem. The addiction was the addiction to comfort, the addiction to approval, the addiction to staying where it felt safe, the addiction to avoiding discomfort. And once he saw it clearly, he couldn't unsee it. For the first time in years, he realized that the prison wasn't around him. The prison was inside him, built from habits, built from excuses, built from fear disguised as logic. And suddenly he faced a choice: continue living the same way, or become someone different. The decision sounds simple, but every meaningful transformation begins with a difficult choice. Because growth always demands something. It demands sacrifice. It demands courage. It demands uncertainty. And most importantly, it demands that you let go of the person you've become. Daniel stood at the edge of that decision. And, deep inside, he knew his life would never be the same again. But what he didn't know was that the hardest battle wasn't waiting outside. It was waiting inside his own mind. And that battle was about to begin. The battle didn't begin the next morning. It began the moment Daniel decided he wanted more from life. Because the second you decide to change, something inside you fights back. Not the world, not other people. You, the version of you that has spent years seeking comfort, the version that wants safety, the version that fears uncertainty, the version that whispers, "Start tomorrow." Daniel felt that voice immediately. The next morning he woke up motivated. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He grabbed his old notebook, wrote his forgotten goals, and promised himself things would be different. But by afternoon, the excitement began to fade. The old habits returned. The old routines called him back. The old excuses sounded reasonable again. And that's when he discovered a truth most people never understand. Motivation is powerful, but it doesn't last. Feelings change. Emotions fade. Excitement disappears. If your future depends on motivation, your future is in danger. Because motivation starts the journey. Discipline finishes it. Most people spend their lives waiting to feel ready. But successful people learn something different. They act before they feel ready. They move before confidence arrives. They begin before certainty exists. Daniel didn't know that yet. He still believed transformation would feel good. He thought becoming stronger would be inspiring. He imagined growth would be exciting. Instead, it was uncomfortable. Painfully uncomfortable. Every new habit felt difficult. Every improvement required effort. Every step forward demanded sacrifice. And suddenly he understood why so many people stay stuck. Because comfort is easy. Growth is hard. Comfort asks for nothing. Growth demands everything. One evening Daniel sat alone in his apartment. His phone was in his hand. Hours disappeared, scrolling through other people's lives, other people's success, other people's achievements, other people's happiness. And the more he watched them, the worse he felt. Until a question appeared in his mind. When was the last time I focused on my own life? That question changed something, because he realized he had spent years consuming, watching, scrolling, comparing, analyzing, judging, but not creating, not building, not growing, not becoming. He was addicted to distraction, and distractions had become a substitute for progress. Every notification gave temporary satisfaction. Every scroll provided temporary escape. Every distraction protected him from facing reality. The reality that his life would never improve unless he changed. That realization hurt. But sometimes pain is necessary, because pain forces awareness, and awareness creates change. For the next few weeks, Daniel started noticing things. The way he made excuses, the way he avoided challenges, the way he searched for comfort whenever life became difficult. He noticed how often he said, "I'll do it later," and he finally understood that later had stolen years from him. Later had become a trap, a beautiful lie, a lie that sounds harmless, but destroys dreams, because later rarely arrives. People wait for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect mood, the perfect conditions. But life doesn't reward perfect timing. Life rewards action. The people who change their lives aren't necessarily smarter. They aren't necessarily more talented. Often they're simply willing to act while others wait. One day Daniel found himself standing in front of a mirror, looking directly at the person responsible for his future. For years he blamed circumstances, the economy, bad luck, his past, other people. But none of those faces stared back at him, only his own. And for the first time he accepted responsibility, not blame. Responsibility. There is a difference. Blame focuses on the past. Responsibility focuses on the future. Blame asks, "Whose fault is this?" Responsibility asks, "What can I do now?" And that question became his new obsession. Every day, every decision, every challenge. Instead of asking why life was unfair, he asked, "What can I do now?" Instead of asking why success was difficult, he asked, "What can I do now?" Instead of waiting for motivation, he asked, "What can I do now?" The answers were often small. Write one page, make one call, take one step, finish one task. But those small actions began creating momentum, and momentum changes everything. Because success rarely arrives suddenly. It arrives gradually, one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one day at a time. Slowly Daniel became someone different, not because of a dramatic breakthrough, not because of luck, but because he started winning small battles, the battle against excuses, the battle against procrastination, the battle against distraction, the battle against comfort. And each victory made him stronger, not physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. For the first time in years he felt progress. Yet something still bothered him. A fear remained, a deep fear he had carried his entire life, the fear of failure, the fear of looking foolish, the fear of being judged. And no matter how much progress he made, that fear refused to disappear. Then one day he heard a sentence that changed everything. The people you are afraid of disappointing are too busy worrying about themselves. At first it sounded simple. Then it hit him. Most people weren't thinking about him at all. They were thinking about themselves, their problems, their fears, their insecurities, their future. The audience he feared didn't really exist. The judgment he feared was mostly in his imagination. And suddenly he felt free, free to fail, free to try, free to grow, free to become someone new, because courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite fear. That realization unlocked something powerful inside him. For years, fear had been driving his decisions. Now purpose was taking the wheel. And when purpose becomes stronger than fear, everything changes. The addiction that once controlled him was losing its power. Comfort no longer looked attractive. Excuses no longer sounded convincing. Distractions no longer felt satisfying. Because Daniel had finally tasted something better. Progress. And once you've experienced real progress, comfort becomes less appealing. You begin to see life differently. You stop asking how to avoid pain and start asking how to grow through it. You stop seeking easy paths and start seeking meaningful ones. You stop living to feel comfortable and start living to become capable. But Daniel's greatest lesson was still ahead of him, a lesson that would completely transform the way he saw success, failure, and the purpose of life itself. And when that lesson arrived, it would change everything, forever. There was a time when Daniel believed success would solve everything. He believed that once he reached his goals, he would finally feel complete, finally feel confident, finally feel happy, finally feel enough. For years he chased that idea, the idea that fulfillment existed somewhere in the future, just beyond the next achievement, just beyond the next milestone, just beyond the next victory. But the more he grew, the more he realized something surprising. Success wasn't changing him as much as he expected, because the biggest transformation wasn't happening around him, it was happening inside him. And one cold evening, that truth became impossible to ignore. Daniel was walking home after a long day. The city lights reflected off the wet streets, cars passed, people hurried by, everyone seemed to be chasing something, money, dataseti, recognition, approval, and suddenly he asked himself a question he had never asked before. What if the goal was never success? The thought stopped him. For years he had been obsessed with reaching a destination. But what if life wasn't about reaching a destination? What if life was about becoming someone worthy of the journey? That night changed everything, because he finally understood the lesson that had been hiding from him all along. The purpose of growth is not achievement. The purpose of growth is transformation. You don't become disciplined so people admire you. You become disciplined because discipline changes who you are. You don't become courageous so people praise you. You become courageous because courage frees you. You don't build character because the world demands it. You build character because your future depends on it. And for the first time, Daniel stopped measuring his life by outcomes. He started measuring it by effort, by integrity, by consistency, by the promises he kept to himself. That shift changed everything, because outcomes are not always under your control. But effort is. Results are not always guaranteed, but action is. And when you focus on what you can control, fear loses its power. For years Daniel had been afraid of failure. Now he saw failure differently. Failure wasn't the enemy. Avoidance was. Failure wasn't what destroyed dreams. Quitting did. Failure wasn't proof that he wasn't capable. It was proof that he was trying. And suddenly, failure became less frightening, because every successful person he admired had failed. Every entrepreneur, every athlete, every creator, every leader, every visionary, they all failed. The difference was simple. They didn't stop. Most people overestimate the power of one failure and underestimate the power of persistence. They think success belongs to the smartest, the luckiest, the most talented. But often success belongs to the person who stayed in the game long enough, the person who refused to quit, the person who kept moving when progress felt invisible, the person who continued long after excitement disappeared. And that's exactly who Daniel was becoming. Months passed, then a year. His life wasn't perfect. Problems still existed. Challenges still appeared. Difficult days still happened. But something was different. He was different. The man who once waited for permission was gone. The man who once needed motivation was gone. The man who once lived for comfort was gone. In his place stood someone stronger. Not because life became easier, because he became stronger. And one day he opened the same notebook he had found months earlier. The notebook filled with forgotten dreams, forgotten goals, forgotten promises. This time he didn't feel regret. He didn't feel sadness. He didn't feel disappointment. He smiled. Because he finally understood something beautiful. The dreams weren't waiting for perfect circumstances. They were waiting for him to believe again, waiting for him to act again, waiting for him to stop hiding behind excuses, waiting for him to stop seeking comfort, waiting for him to become the person capable of carrying them. And as he turned the pages, he noticed something. Many goals were still unfinished. Many dreams still remained. Many mountains still stood ahead. But for the first time, that didn't bother him, because he had discovered a secret most people never learn. Happiness doesn't come from arriving. It comes from becoming. The person chasing growth is often happier than the person who has stopped growing. The person building a meaningful life is often happier than the person chasing approval. The person moving forward is often happier than the person standing still, because human beings are designed to grow, to evolve, to improve, to become. And whenever we ignore that calling, something inside us suffers. That's why comfort becomes dangerous. Not because comfort is evil, because comfort becomes a prison when it prevents growth. A prison with soft walls, a prison that feels safe, a prison that doesn't look like a prison. Until one day, you realize years have disappeared, and the person you wanted to become feels very far away. Daniel almost lived his entire life inside that prison. Almost, but not quite, because one day he made a choice, a simple choice, a difficult choice, a life-changing choice. He chose growth over comfort, again and again and again, until that choice became his identity. And that's when the final lesson revealed itself. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your choices. Every day you vote. Every habit is a vote. Every excuse is a vote. Every action is a vote. Every decision is a vote. You're constantly voting for the person you are becoming. The question is, who are you voting for? The stronger version of yourself, or the comfortable version, the disciplined version, or the distracted version, the courageous version, or the fearful version? The future you're hoping for is being created right now, not next year, not next month, not tomorrow, today in this moment, with this choice. And maybe that's why you're listening to this story. Maybe something inside you already knows. Maybe you're tired of waiting, tired of procrastinating, tired of making promises you'll never keep, tired of living below your potential, tired of knowing you're capable of more. If that's true, then listen carefully. You don't need another motivational speech. You don't need another perfect plan. You don't need another excuse. You need a decision, a real decision, the kind of decision that changes behavior, because your future will never change until your actions do. Not your intentions, not your wishes, not your dreams, your actions. And here's the truth, most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Nobody is coming. Nobody is coming to save your future. Nobody is coming to build your dream. Nobody is coming to become the person you're supposed to be. That responsibility belongs to you. And while that may sound frightening, it's actually the most empowering truth in the world. Because if nobody else controls your future, then nobody else can stop you either. Not your past, not your mistakes, not your failures, not your fears, not your circumstances. The moment you take ownership of your life, everything changes, because ownership creates power, and power creates change. Years later, Daniel would look back on the moment everything began. It wasn't the day he achieved success. It wasn't the day he reached his goals. It wasn't the day other people finally noticed him. It was the day he stopped waiting. The day he stopped choosing comfort. The day he finally decided to take responsibility for the life he wanted. That was the day his future changed, and maybe today is that day for you. Maybe years from now you'll look back at this exact moment. Not because everything changed overnight, but because you finally made a choice to stop feeding the addiction that was stealing your future, a choice to stop settling, a choice to stop hiding, a choice to stop waiting, a choice to grow, because in the end, the greatest tragedy isn't failure. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of your life and discovering how much potential remained unused, how many dreams remained untouched, how many opportunities remained ignored, how much greatness remained trapped behind comfort. Don't let that be your story. Your story is still being written. Your future is still being built. Your next chapter is still waiting. And it begins with one decision, one action, one step. Today, not tomorrow, not someday, today. Because the silent addiction that's ruining your life has only one source of power, your permission. And the moment you stop giving it permission, the moment you choose growth over comfort, the moment you decide that your future matters more than your excuses, everything begins to change, slowly, then suddenly, until one day you wake up and realize something incredible. The person you spent years searching for, the confident person, the disciplined person, the courageous person, the person capable of building an extraordinary life, was never somewhere out in the world. They were inside you the entire time waiting for you to wake them up. And that changes everything.